Hello, I'm Michael Cantrell, and you are listening to the Prison Officer Podcast, a place to have a conversation about the forgotten cops that work in this country's jails, prisons, and correctional centers. A place for me to try to make sense of a career spent working inside the fence with some of the greatest people that nobody sees or recognizes for the important job they do to keep this world safe. If you love this podcast, hit the follow button, or better yet, share with your family, friends, or coworkers. In more than 28 years of corrections, I have used or supervised PepperBall hundreds of times. Now, as a master instructor for PepperBall, I teach others about the versatility and effectiveness of this PepperBall system. From cell extractions to disturbances on the rec yard, PepperBall is the first option in my correctional toolbox. One of the most dangerous times for officers is during cell extractions. PepperBall allows officers to respond with the lowest level of force and still be effective and ready if the situation escalates. The responding officer controls where the projectiles are aimed, how many projectiles are launched, and how rapidly they're deployed. This allows the response to be tailored to the moment. To learn more about PepperBall, go to www.pepperball.com or click the link below in the show's information guide. PepperBall is the safer option first. Well, hello and welcome back to the Prison Officer Podcast. My guest today is Bronner Allen. He started his corrections career at New Hanover Correctional Center in Wilmington, North Carolina. He spent 5 years there as a sergeant and was a member of the prison emergency response team. And after that, he decided to try his hand at the federal side. So he got hired on with the BOP at FCC Butner, activated the Federal Medical Center there. He was also part of the activation team for Federal Correctional Institution number 2 at Butner. He was on the disturbance control team for 10 years, got promoted to lieutenant, transferred to USP Pollock in Louisiana, spent 10 years there and retired. Took a 6-month break, I guess got bored, and he went back to where it all began, back to New Hanover Correctional Center in North Carolina. And we're going to talk to him about that, the transitions he made, some of the things he learned, and what he's doing today. So welcome to the Prisoner Officer Podcast, Bronner.
Thank you.
Is that what people call you, Bronner?
They actually call me Bama.
Bama?
Bama.
Okay. Is that what you prefer?
I do.
Okay. I'll call you Bama. So I always like to start at the beginning. Tell me where you grew up and, how that was and how your life when you were younger was.
Well, I grew up in Jacksonville, North Carolina. My dad was a Marine, and we spent most of our time right here in North Carolina. Never really got out of North Carolina. Yeah. And I graduated from Camp Lejeune High School. We went to Colorado for a couple of years, but, I really don't remember all that. I was like 8, 9 years old. Mm-hmm. Came back to North Carolina and just grew up around the Marine Corps. Decided to play baseball, and that didn't take off anywhere. My dad was a correctional officer, so he kept on talking about going to prison. I'm like, nah, you keep all that. I don't want nothing to do with that. SWAT teams and, deputy sheriffs, police officers, that was the deal. I wanted to do that. Sure. Be U.S. Marshal. And I said, well, I'm going to take baseball first. And baseball just wasn't working out.
Yeah.
I tried for hundreds of teams. And I probably tried out for every Major League Baseball team there is.
Oh, and, wow.
It just didn't, it felt good. There was a lot of handshakes at the end going, hey, man, we're going to keep an eye on you. I'm like, going, okay. When?
When?
But, there were some days where I thought, I'm never going to get a call from you guys. And there's days like, oh my God, I played great. This is awesome. Yeah. But I had a wife, 2 kids, and I just needed to find a real job. And Dad said, come on board. I'm like,
yeah. So where'd he work at?
He worked at New Hanover. He worked at New Hanover Correctional Center. He retired from the Marine Corps and went and did that. And I went to BLET, which is the basic law enforcement training. And I wanted to be a police officer. And I said, you can still keep that prison deal because I'm not going to do it.
Right.
And it was just like the police department wanted reserve officers all the time, and they weren't paying nothing. So my wife's like going, you got to figure out something. We got to get you a job. So I went to my dad's house, which was right across the street. I said, all right, I'll do it. You know what
Right.
I got to do. And then
Did you think you were just going to do it for a little bit until you could find something else? Is that how you started?
That was the plan. I'm just going to go there, work a year, and, you know, maybe get hired on with, you know, the highway patrol or get hired on with, you know, the police department. But after that first year, you know, it's like going, man, I like what I do.
Yeah.
This is a pretty cool job.
That's interesting. So in North Carolina, are correctional officers considered law enforcement there, or are they not?
No.
Okay.
It's, you know, it's funny because when I first started, I had my BLET, I had my certification, and I really wanted to keep that certification, maybe work as a reserve officer.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know at the time. And Brunswick County said, hey, we'll hire you. You know, I knew the sheriff real good. And so I went over there and filled all the stuff. And next thing you know, I'm in the warden's office saying, hey, so you decided you want to carry a gun off duty? I'm like going, well, I was going to work for you. So you can't hold two positions at the same time.
Right.
I guess kind of like the federal bureau, you know, the bureau does.
Yep.
Since I was carrying a gun, I had to make a decision, either the sheriff department or the prison. And I said, well, I guess I'm going back to prison. So I lost all my certifications and everything like that. And now, you know, it's weird. It's how it works. It's they give you a concealed carry. They give you a card that says, hey, you know, you're a law enforcement officer, but we're still not. So kind of like, you know, remember back in the days when we started, you know, the Bureau came out with those ID cards that said law enforcement officer across the top. Remember those days?
Yeah,
Then they came back. They came back and said, oh, we need all those back.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, North Carolina is not considered, you know, law enforcement. Like New Jersey or New York, I hear them. They're actually certified law enforcement.
Right.
So, but North Carolina is not.
You grew up with a correctional officer, so I know that you heard stories and you had some idea of what you were going to walk into. But tell me about the first day when you walked in there. Were you prepared for what you saw?
I was, you know, I used to see Dad come home with torn shirts, you know, blood on his shirts or the shirt in the bag. And, but he was big. He was huge. I mean, he was kind of like, you know, he could have been a professional wrestler. Right. He was just solid, and inmates didn't bother him. That was actually the inmate blood, not his. And so I was like, all right, well, he talked to me, you know. I actually talked to some of the lieutenants that he worked with, and they kind of guided me a little bit. And I said, okay, I'm ready. So the first day, I remember walking in there. It was all paperwork. I had to wear a button-down shirt and tie. And all the inmates would sit back and go, oh, hey, he must be probation parole. You know, so I had to wear a tie. Right. And they come up and ask questions. And because I hadn't got my uniforms yet. And so I remember that first day just walking around with another officer and him showing me what to do, tell me what to do, explaining things. And it was like going, man, this is great. I could do this. I mean, the inmates are just like regular people, you know, on the street. Right. They come up and say hi to you and say, you know, where are you from? And then it's kind of like going, okay, don't get too personal. But so it actually was a couple of weeks, you know, working with other officers that got me to my first night when they said, hey, you're going to night watch. And, you know, well, morning watch. And I remember that first night, I was scared to death. It went straight from being really comfortable during the daytime because I was with somebody to going in there and them locking the doors on me and being by myself. And, you know, there's 64 inmates in there. Yeah. And I was scared. I will not lie to you. I was scared. Yeah. And I'm like, well, this ain't for me. I ain't going to be able to do this.
You know, people that work there understand, but a lot of people that have never worked in prison, you don't have the key to let yourself out. You're in that housing unit. Somebody else has to let you out, in and out of it. So it's a whole different feeling when that door locks and it's just you and the inmates overnight.
Well, you know, like New Hanover, it's minimum security. So the yard officer will come on, they'll lock the door, you know, but you can get out if you wanted to. Right. You're going to set up a whole lot of alarms, but you can get out.
Oh, okay.
But the whole thing was like, later on, as we go on, when you hear those sally ports shut and that door in control say, hey, all secure, those are the doors you can't get out of. It's like, oh my God, now I'm really stuck. But I remember sitting in the chair, just thinking to myself, going, man, I made a big mistake. This ain't for me. And so about halfway through that night, I just started getting up, walking around. By then, all the inmates are kind of going to sleep. And a couple of inmates watching TV. And I'm like going, okay, this is a do or die right here. You got to make a decision.
Yeah.
Is this for you? Are you going to go home in the morning and tell Dad, can't do it, it's over with? Or are you just going to try to link it out? I was more scared of my dad at that point, halfway through the night, telling him than saying, hey, let's try this one more night.
Yeah.
Then as the time went on, a couple of nights later, I was like going, man, this is easy. This is just like a babysitter. People come up and ask me questions and I tell them, yeah, you can't take a shower. Or, no, you can't take a shower. Or, yeah, here's some soap. Here's some paperwork, request forms. I'm like, that's all I got to do. This is a piece of cake.
Is all of New Hanover a minimum, or is there different prisons in that center?
No, it's all minimum security. It's the largest work release camp in the state of North Carolina.
Okay. Yep. I worked for one of those for a while in Missouri. So you've got inmates going out every day to different areas and working. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that.
When I first started, it was more like they go out for, you had your road crews, your community work programs, and those are still inmates. You had officers with them. Then you had inmates that would go out for like electricians. They worked at restaurants, which that blew my mind right there. I was like, going, okay, honey, we're not eating here. We're not eating here. And so it was kind of like an eye opener. But these guys were they wore blue jeans. They wore regular street clothes. So you couldn't even tell they were inmates. Right. We had guys going to Cape Fear Community College. They were working the United States battleship. But then I come back 30 years later, almost, or 25 years later, and they're no longer can wear jeans outside. Yeah. They have to wear their regular inmate clothes, but when they get to work, they wear these like their sweatshirts that say like Coastal Precast or Net Logistics is a couple of the places that they work at. Right. And the thing is, as soon as they get back to the camp, they have to take that stuff off. They have to put their regular greens back on. Right. But they got, I think, maybe 180 work release inmates out of the 400 that we have there. So they go out every morning. There's a couple other work programs that they go out, but they're not really considered work release. So, the morning time is busy. 6 o'clock comes, we're at the gate patting inmates down, making sure they're not bringing anything out, and get them on their jobs. And they're gone until 4 o'clock that afternoon.
Right. So you get your first promotion there, right? You make sergeant?
Yeah, I was I think it was about year 3. I took the sergeant exam, and I kept on going all over the state of North Carolina. Wanted to be a sergeant. Right. And I started doing a lot of acting sergeant. Actually didn't have those stripes yet, but doing a lot of acting sergeant. Sure. And I had a big mentor that Mae McAllister, and she was just one of the greatest sergeants I ever worked for. Matter of fact, she's probably one of the greatest supervisors I worked for. Oh. And she was just so very knowledgeable about everything. And there was times where she came in, she says, hey, I'm going to sit back and relax tonight, run the show. And I'm like, all right, I got it. And so it's funny because when another correctional officer came in, and she's like going, hey, she says, I got permission from your wife. We're going to go to a hotel in Raleigh and spend the night together. And I'm thinking to myself going, what? There's no way you got permission from my wife. And she says, no, there's a job fair in Butner, North Carolina. She says, so we're going to stay in Raleigh, and we're going to go to this job fair for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. I'm like going, you have to have a degree to get in Bureau of Prisons. There's a lot of stuff that you got to have, which I didn't know. Right. She says, no. She says, you don't. She says, experience is all you need. Education will help, but hey, Experience is all you need. So I call my wife immediately. I'm like, going, hey, you're going to let me go on stay at a hotel with Jamie? She says, yeah, she wants you to go to this job fair with her. And I'm like, okay. So we get to the hotel and there's separate rooms. She paid for everything. And so I went in there for the interview for the job fair. And back then, remember, it's like after you did the application, it was like 120 pounds. Yeah. You remember doing that? It was not online. You had to do everything where you had to handwrite everything. And I think that application on some of it. Yep. I think that application weighed 120 pounds. And it was about 2 months later. I get the interview.
Right.
Not even 2 months. I think it was maybe a month. And I go up there and I ace this thing. Mm-hmm. Kathy Davis, she was the human resource manager at the time at Butner. And she called me out of the office and she says, that's probably one of the best interviews that I've ever sat on. She's like, cool. This. She says, I wouldn't say quit your job, but I would start making preparations. And I said, okay. So I got back home and I said, hey, look, I got the job, but I don't have the job. And my wife's like, what does that mean? I said, they said I did great. That they got to do some background checks, which I'm thinking is great. Everything's going to be good. So it takes about 6 months because my dad we got the same last name. I mean, same last name. Of course we have the same last name. I'm a junior. Right, so when they did my credit check with the bureau, they brought some of my dad's stuff up. And we're trying to figure out, hey, I've never had an account with these people. Mm-hmm. And so it took a couple months for them to figure it out. And so I get a call from my warden. He says, hey, I need you to come in. And he's all excited. I'm like going, I got promoted to sergeant. I'm not even thinking about the bureau now. So I walk into his office. He's got these sergeant stripes laid out on the desk. And I'm excited now. I'm like, oh, man, I'm getting promoted. He says, man, I was going to give you these. He said, but I got a phone call from the Bureau of Prisons. And at first I was like going, why would they call you? Yeah. He says, they want to know a start date for you. I was like, I'm glad they called you because I didn't even call me. Right. And he's like this. He said, well, I'm going to let you go ahead and do that instead of giving these. I'll give them to somebody else. So I actually didn't wear the stripes, but I did act as a sergeant. And I started with the Bureau about like a month later.
Wow.
So it was
interesting. Your first duty station is Butner?
Is Butner. And it was empty. There was nobody there. I was one of the 15 officers to start there. So I was actually one of the officers to start. Yeah. When we opened up. Which was pretty cool.
And you went in knowing it was going to be a medical center?
Yes.
Any worries about that? Did you know anything about medical centers? Because I spent 14 years at Springfield, so I know a lot about Butner.
Yeah, I had. We did some med trips there to Springfield, which was interesting. Yeah. Your Sallyport, all that good stuff going down. It looked like a tunnel. Yep. But yeah, I didn't know anything about medical.
Yeah, it's a different mission, isn't it? Yeah. You can think you know a lot about corrections and walk into a medical center and you got to relearn a lot of stuff.
Well, and that you say that, and that's exactly what I thought. I thought, hey, I was an active sergeant. I know my job. I've been doing this for 5 years, and I had a lot of competitions with some other officers because of that. They're like going, whatever you learned at the state, you need to forget. Yeah. And they were like going. I said, well, whatever, dude. I just kept ignoring it, and then Art Beeler, he was our warden, and probably the greatest man I've ever met in my life. Yep. I admire Mr. Beeler, more than probably any warden I've ever had, except one, which I'll tell you here in a little bit.
Okay.
But Mr. Beeler, he said he'd call you by your first name. He would never call you Alan or whatever, but he knew like 1,300 staff members' names by the first.
Right.
And he would always say, "Hey, Bronner, come and sit with me a little bit." He said, "I've been hearing some issues." I'm like going, "Oh man, I'm getting fired." He's like this. He says, "This is the mission of the medical center." And he would go over the mission. He'd go over his expectations, those 15 expectations that every warden has. And he says, carry these with you your whole career. He says, you'll never go bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, but he taught me a lot. Anytime I had a problem, his door was opened up and you go in there and you could talk to him, man to man, not officer to warden.
Right.
And so I learned a lot at the medical center. You had your cadre inmates, which those are the ones that cleaned up the hospital.
Sure.
Then you had your mental health inmates, which that's the first time I ever started seeing real fights and everything like that. No stabbings yet. That come later. But there was a lot of issues that really kind of set your mind at a deep space that people really don't understand. Like you said, working at a medical center, you work your pens, your mediums, but at a medical center, when you got inmates that are dying all the time, that really, really takes an effect on you. And a lot of people didn't want to work those floors where those inmates are dying. You had those officers that did, but I think they had medical experience too, some of them. So they've been around that. But I remember an incident that happened where an inmate, my first inmate I ever had die on me, and it was horrific. It looked like a scene out of The Exorcist.
Yeah,
and that really, really put a big old toll on me my whole career. I see different things, and I automatically think about this inmate that passed away. He had a GI bleed, so it was nothing that was on us. It was just something that he got, and I think he had started like asthma or something that day, and it just went on, and then it ended up becoming a GI bleed, and it was a horrific experience for a lot of people. Because I've never been around that. I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
And they actually gave me a couple of days off and said, "Hey, relax.
Oh wow.
Take it easy."
Yeah.
No, but it was terrible.
Yeah, dealing with death is a whole different thing. Of course, I worked at Springfield, and one of the wards, was where a lot of inmates went to their final days. And people don't understand. I had 1 quarter, 3 months, where I put 22 inmates in a body bag. Most people will never see that much death unless they're involved in something traumatic in their lifetime, But here I am putting these guys in body bags and toe tagging them and taking pictures and making sure that they get down to R&D the correct way. And you're dealing with dead bodies in a way that a lot of people never will. And it takes a little bit of toll on you. You look at life differently, and I don't know. It stays with you. I've got some of those that stayed with me also. Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, the body bags. I remember it wasn't him; it was another inmate. When we first got there, they had it's kind of like they put them in stages where you get on the 5th floor, and it's like, okay, you're in 5A or 5B, you're good. You're just up there recovering. If you get to 5A, you're on your deathbed.
Right.
5B, it was it. Inmate already knew it. If he was going to 5B, I'm on my final days. Sure. And you walk the floor as an officer, and you would see DNR, 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 DNR on all these doors. And I'm like going, what is a DNR? And they're like going, it means that we're not going to resuscitate him. We're not going to go in there and give him CPR. We're just going to let him go. And I'm like going, is that humane? They're like, yeah, it is. And then I remember the first day,
they make them comfortable with drugs and stuff usually.
Oh, they do.
In pain there at the end. So for people listening, it's not like you just let them suffer.
No,
they're given hospice type treatment all the way to the end.
Oh, exactly. I mean, the guys they're treated tremendously. But I remember that first day they said, okay, so and so passed away, and I'm like going, man, I hate that, And they said, okay, well, we got to get ready for the morgue, because the medical center, I don't know if Springfield had we had a morgue. Yeah, we take the inmates down. we take the inmates down the morgue and we'd put them in the freezer there and wait for, mortuary service to come pick them up, which was within a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember them bringing in this bag, and I'm like going, what are y'all gonna do with that? They said, well, we got to wrap them up. And I'm like going, this is crazy. And at first the same thing. I'm like going, man, I don't want to do this. I'd rather just go work somewhere else. And but I remember putting that tag on his toe and wrapping him up, and then moving him from the hospital bed to a gurney, taking him down the morgue, and then having to count him. But I remember, like I said, taking him down the morgue, and then count came, and they said, hey, you need to go down the morgue and count that guy. I'm like going, you're joking, right? And they're like, no, you got to make sure he's still there. I'm like going, I don't think he's going anywhere. They're like going, you never know. I'm like going, you got to be kidding me. So I got the keys down the morgue. I go down there and I kind of open the refrigerator door up. Well, that door, and I said, well, he's still here. And I hightailed back out of there. But yeah, I mean,
he's on the count till he's inside the fence. He's on the count. And,
until that mortuary service comes.
Yeah. And a lot of people will think that's just crazy, but one of the escapes that we had while I was at the Federal Medical Center, the officers were downtown sitting on an inmate who had open heart surgery. Okay. They had cracked his chest and went in there and done open heart surgery. The officers weren't doing their jobs, had went to sleep and did not chain him. He was up and gone within hours of having open heart surgery. So, you can't take chances on stuff like that. You until they're outside your fence and they're pronounced dead, we count them. Yeah,
it's
kind of crazy.
We had one die at the hospital, and the hospital, the outside hospital, and we were working on, and he had a blood clot straight to his brain, and so we called the medical center and we said, hey man, so and so passed away. He's gone. And they're like going, all right, well, one of you could leave, but one of you has to stay. Right. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself going, well, we both got to stay. Why can't we both leave? They said, well, R&D's got to come out and they got to fingerprint them. They got to take pictures. They got to do all this. And then, somebody's going to come in and take the body. And once they take the body, then you could go. And I'm like going, well, this is free time. I just sit back and watch TV. This is awesome. And then R&D came and they took their fingerprints and they took photos. And then it was kind of like going, hey, can you hang out here another hour? Because I guess R&D didn't want to stay. So I said, well, I can hang out another hour, no problem. And then the mortuary service came in and I signed a piece of paper saying, hey, he's yours. Now, at first I was like, well, I'm not signing nothing. Let me call somebody. And they called. They said, Alan, you can sign it. It's okay. Yeah. I'm like, all right. So I signed it and I said, all right, here's the body. Right. I said, I can go home now, right? They said, yeah, you don't need to stay. But it's really interesting work at the medical center. I tried when we opened up the medium, the high, I went over there, we activated it, and that was my first time ever seeing penitentiary inmates.
Right.
And I didn't like that at all. I was like, I'm going back to medical center. And because I didn't want that violence. It sounds kind of funny, but I ended up going to the same place that these guys came from. Right. And end up working there for another 10 years. And but the violence it was unreal. It was Aryan Brotherhood. They beat a guy to a pope.
Right.
And then we're like going, hey, get back. And they're like going, hold on a minute. And they checked the guy. The guy actually checked his pulse and said, he's still breathing. We're good. And they went back and sat down. I'm like going, so you didn't kill him? He said, we didn't want to kill him. We just want him to feel what we feel. I'm like, whatever that means.
And that's when you were at Pollock, right?
No, that was still at Budner.
That was at Budner? Okay.
Yeah, that was at the medium high when when the medium high opened up, the first set of inmates we got was 128 inmates for special housing. Yeah. They were all penitentiary inmates. They were all going to like a SMU,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was. So we're their stop-off point to say, hey, you're going to house these 120 inmates until we get a bus come in and take them to SMU, which is that special management unit. And then we'll break them off there. So we're like going, okay, well, we're also just going to work restrictive housing. And there's a lieutenant, and I think it was Lieutenant Davis. I think he went on to be a captain. He was a great guy, always very knowledgeable. He says, I need a set of crew, so I'm going to pick my own officers. And I was one of the officers that he picked. Yeah. And we all went over to the medium, and it was a set crew. In the war, there was no union involvement, no nothing. And, of course, we all know what the union's going to do. Oh, wait a minute, so-and-so wants to go. He's got more seniority. So the union didn't even get involved. The union was like going, hey, that's fine with us. You guys could pick who you want to go over there. Yeah. So they picked probably about 20 of us, 30 of us, and we went over there and we worked those three shifts. And that's what the lieutenant wanted. And that's what the warden agreed on. So,
but that was when you're dealing with that kind of stuff, who and what officers working there, because there's officers out there that come in and will stir up stuff. And then there's officers who come in and keep things calm. So when you're dealing with that level of inmate, absolutely, if you can do that, that would have been great.
It's like, you got, we had a J unit, which is a separate unit at Butner that you had to be a select officer to work there. Right. Same thing. The union, that was part of the MOU with the warden, saying, hey, when it comes to this particular post, if I don't like this officer, he's not working it.
Right.
And it was a select unit that it only held 5 inmates. And those inmates were like, the blind sheik that was there. Yep. A couple of the other 911 inmates that were up there that the marshals brought in that night. They stayed 2 nights, and then we shipped them off somewhere else, which I don't know where they went. But that was a unit where only a select few could work.
Right.
And I must have been pretty good because I got selected for a couple of these jobs. Sometimes I can sit back and go, man, I must have been a really dumbass for, some of these places because I didn't get the credit that I wanted. But yet you sit back and you look at some of these things, go, wait a minute. If I was a dumbass, then I really wouldn't have been selected for all these other positions.
Right. So did you work much with the last episode I had is dealing with mental health inmates, and I talk a little bit about dealing with that. Did you deal with very much mental health while you were there? Mental illness?
Oh my God, all the time.
Tell me about that.
I like staying in control. So I work control a lot, but then when I had to go out to work mental health, I worked mental health. And these guys, it's a whole different animal. It's a whole different beast. Right. These guys, they just on a drop of a dime, they get their wrong dose of medication, or they don't come to the window to get their medication. They become the strongest individuals in the world. You're talking about a 100-pound inmate that, is going to fight 10 staff, and it's crazy. And they walk around like zombies sometimes. They don't take showers. They don't take, they don't clean up. They don't do hygiene. And we actually have to go in there and get them and bring them out so the nurse could give them their shot of whatever to calm them down. And then we'll take them in the shower and we'll actually have to shower these guys.
Yeah.
But same thing. It goes back to, wait, I'm a correctional officer. I'm supposed to be doing this and that. Why am I having to bathe inmates? Why am I having to do this and that? Well, you signed up for this job. This is part of working here at the medical center.
One of the things I said, and I came from penitentiaries before I went to Springfield, but I had dealt with penitentiary inmates, and I knew, for the most part, you could read body language. You could read what was going to happen. You could read if you were going to get attacked, by the way a person might be flexing their hands or their posture when they were coming up to you, from an inmate. And when I went to the medical center, I wasn't ready for the switch that they have, because they go from just this blank stare to all of a sudden you're getting attacked by someone that's out of control.
Exactly.
And there's nothing in between to tell you it's coming. That was the hardest thing for me.
And our thing was to, as a correctional officer, and we both say the same thing. And I think when Glenn was on your podcast, Mike was on your podcast, they kind of said the same thing. It's the hands. We're always watching the hands. Take your hands out of your pockets. Take your hands, behind your back. I want to see your hands.
Right.
The mental health inmates, you see their hands all the time, and they'd be down by their side, but then all of a sudden you see their hands kind of crunching. It's kind of like they're like going, "Hey, are they losing feeling in their hands?" Nope, they're getting ready to jump on you.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that we watched all the time. If you see an inmate walking around the vestibule, because how the medical center, I don't know how Springfield was set up, but the medical center, they always had a nurses or officer station vestibule in the middle. Right. Then they had the cells they wrapped around the corridor. And so the inmates walked around this vestibule all the time. And you see them stop, and all of a sudden their hands would start opening up. And you're like going, "Oh, here we go." And the nurse would say, "Hey," and they start pointing. And they're like going, "I think he's getting ready to go." So we walk them back to his cell. And most of the time, knock on wood, that, they went to their cell and they lay down. But there was times where before we get around the corner, they were on the floor, or they were trying to grab a hold of, whatever they could grab a hold of. And there was some, pretty good, assaults on officers, where they got punched in the face. Nothing major, like, when I get ready to go to a penitentiary. But,
sure.
A lot of it was on inmate, where another inmate just kind of crossed that path and the inmate was right there waiting for him.
Yeah.
But you're right. Mental health was kind of freaky. But we did have I remember an inmate. He was a federal officer at the time. Well, he not at the time, but he used to be one. He got caught up in an inmate abuse charge, where other officers, jumped on an inmate, and when they filmed it, when they were looking at the camera, he was in the elevator with those officers, so he got charged. And he ended up coming to Bronner, but he was playing the mental health card, and saying that, hey, and he would, for like a whole year, he was just walking around that vestibule, like I said, like in a zombie state. And a female officer was getting attacked by an inmate, another mental health inmate. And you can see the camera where he kind of looked in the vestibule, and he looked back, and he shook his head. He's like, "Damn." And he ran in there and saved her life.
Oh, wow.
And, yep. And they were like going, "Wait a minute. You were just like a zombie, for a whole year." He said, "Look," he said, "I was not going to let this officer get attacked."
Yeah.
He says, "So
how'd she do? Was she okay?"
Yeah, she's fine. I mean, she just got knocked down. They hit her with the inmate hit her with the back of one of those room dusters. You know what I'm talking about? Can't remember what we used to call them. It was a dustpan with the long stick.
Yep.
And he hit her with that and knocked her down. And was probably getting ready to do some other things. And this like I said, this inmate saw her, and he's like, "Dang." And he actually got on her radio, and what threw everybody off was, "Officer needs assistance. Officer needs assistance. We're in, 1G, officer down." I mean, he was just boom, 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 just calling out the codes. And when we got there, it was almost like we were hitting him. He's like, "Whoa, whoa, I'm the one that called it. I'm the one that called it." We're like going, "You could talk?"
Wow. That's a crazy story.
I think a couple of weeks later, they actually let him out. He got he got a conditional release, saying, "Hey, we appreciate what you did."
Yeah.
But that was my stint really at the medical center, and then my favorite warden of all time, Sarah Revel.
Yeah.
That was my mom. Yeah. That was my mom. Yeah. And she was just unbelievable. She was just I can't explain her. Just her attitude, the way she talked to staff, the way she took care of staff. Me and I don't know if you know Ty Rule.
Yep.
Me and Ty were her boys, and Ty had a little bit more than me, though. I don't know. I mean, he knew her at Florence, but her and Ty he was really close. And then I came in the picture, and Miss Rebel took me under her wing, and it was on after that. And I remember we were in ART, and it was January the 6th of 2011. She come in, and it was that Friday where all the wardens get together, and they say, hey, this is what we expect out of you, where they talk ethics and all that good stuff. Sure. And at the end, she was like going, I get to do something I have never done in my career. I get to promote somebody in this room. And in front of people, instead of just call them on the phone or call them in my office. Yeah. And I was sitting around going, who got promoted, And she's like, I get to promote my son and, Bronner Allen. And everybody kind of looked like, your son? And we had known each other. Miss Rebel had been there for years. Yeah. And I'm like going, I'm getting promoted? She says, yeah, you're going to USP Pollock, Louisiana. I was like, whew, where's that at? And I said, she's like, it's Louisiana. I said, where's Louisiana? And she was like going, it's down by Texas. I was like going, okay. So I was kind of excited. And then,
So had you put in for any place, or what made you put in for?
It was a complex. And we all know that, if I put in for a single institution, I'd probably be a 9 lieutenant all my career. Mm-hmm. So I started putting in for complexes. And it's funny because I put in for Butner, and I don't know, for some reason I couldn't get Butner. And Mr. Eichenbaum, he was the South Central, North Mid-Atlantic Regional Director at the time.
Right.
And he had come and was talking to the staff and said, my philosophy is that I will not promote within the institutions anymore. He says, if you want to get promoted, you do the move. Well. And I was like going, well, there goes my chance of going to being a lieutenant at Butner. So that's when I put in for the different complexes. And, I had wardens and captains, that would come up and say, Alan, put in for your lieutenant. Put in for your lieutenant. And that meant a lot that, people thought of me that way. Sure. I had great lieutenants, great captains, Teddy Moscar, Sean Kearney, Davis, Brian Smith. Oh man, if he ever watches this, he'll probably be mad at me. Kelly Smith. They're all my lieutenants and mentors at Butner. And Kelly Smith, me and him did not get along when I first got there. And later, he was one of my biggest supporters. He really believed in me. And like I said, Sean Kearney and Teddy Moscar, they all believed in me. And I still play golf with a couple of them today. But I got to Pollock, and I'm like going,
so
all right.
Was it more them wanting you to become a lieutenant, or was there reasons you wanted to become a lieutenant? Was it just something you felt like you needed to do, or?
I did. I felt like it was time. Okay. When Bennettsville opened up in, I think, 2006 or somewhere around that area, I put in for it, and Mr. Beeler, he was like going, put in for it, put in for it. So I put in for it, and and then I kind of was like going, I'm not ready yet.
Right.
I don't think I'm ready to be a lieutenant yet. And he was mad, and I was like, sorry, I'm not ready to go. I'm not ready to take that role yet. Yeah. And about 10 years later, 10 years into my career, I decided that, what, I've been a GSA for, 7 of those 10 years. I was one of the few that got our 8s really fast. Yeah. I came in as a 6, got my 7 the following year. 2 years later, we all got 8s. And those were the ones that activated the medical center.
Yeah.
And Mr. Beeler gave us.
Yeah, it sounds like our careers had a very are common in many ways, and that's one of them that I feel like we're in common. I had 12 years in the Bureau before I promoted. Now, I had been acting for years and years. They kept pulling me, go be acting lieutenant and stuff, but you couldn't get promoted there. But I also didn't feel like I was ready. I for some reason, I didn't feel like I was ready to step into that. And I think part of that was, and you can tell me if you felt this, I had such great lieutenants at the time. That felt like a huge step to reach their level, and later on, once I got there, I saw that it wasn't as big a step. It was how you supervised and what you did for the people under you. But I think it was the fact that I had these lieutenants who kind of, they were top bar lieutenants there at the medical center, and I didn't know that I could reach that level. And I think there's people that do that, all over the place. And sometimes you just gotta jump. When that door opens, walk through it and do your best, because I don't know that you're ever completely ready. What do you think?
Yeah, and I agree. You got good lieutenants that you work for that you're around all the time and you admire, and it's like going, man, these guys are just awesome. I want to be just like them. And then as time goes by, you start seeing the little things that kind of change your mind. Like when I put in for my lieutenant, when I knew I was ready, Lieutenant Champ, Joe Champ, he was on his way retiring, and he stayed a few years after I went to Pollock. But there was an incident where we were down there in special housing, and it was with a door issue, the door opening up. And I kind of put my foot at the door and held the door. He's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Hey, we ain't got enough staff."
Mm-hmm.
And it was like when he was like going, he closed the door and locked the door. And it was like going, "Look, I'm the lieutenant." I'm like, "You know what? I'm getting ready to be a lieutenant." I said, "I'm going to go ahead and put in for this." I said, "I'm going to make a difference."
Right.
But me and Joe got along great. He was a great lieutenant. So I'm not knocking him. It was just that one incident that I remember. That was the incident that said,
Sure.
It's time to put in. Because it was one of those things where I thought it was time for me to make a difference. It was time for me to use all this experience that I brought in to start throwing at officers saying, "Hey, this is the right way to do things. This is the wrong way of doing things." So I put in for lieutenant, and I got it the first shot. I mean,
Right.
I don't think my application. Well, I take that back. I lied to you. I put in for Tallahassee, Florida, and another officer that me and her worked control together, and she got it. And I was so disappointed. I'm like, "Oh my God, I wanted to go to Florida, and you got the position." She says, "Well, there's other positions." And it was like 3-4 months later, Miss Rebel, promoted me. But I was the same thing. I acted as a lieutenant for about a year, and it seemed like you got to month 30, day 30 of that month, and day 28 of 30 days. And they say, "Hey, you need to go work the cadre." I'm like going,
Right.
"Okay." And I didn't realize at the time that if I'd hit that 30 day, they would have had to pay me GS9 pay.
Yeah.
And so they would send us back to the cadre and work a couple of days, then say, "Okay, hey, start lieutenant again." But I knew what I was doing when, I got to Pollock.
I would like to take a minute to thank one of our sponsors that make the Prison Officer Podcast possible. Omni RTLS is a company that I've been working with for the last year. I am proud to be part of this team of correctional professionals who have developed the best real-time locating system on the market today. With Omni's real-time location technology, you automatically know the accurate locations and interactions of all inmates, staff, and assets anywhere in your correctional facility, and you have this information in real time. Omni is cutting-edge software for today's jails and prisons. It is the only way to monitor every square inch of your facility while still being PREA compliant. Go to www.omnirtls for more information and to make your facility safer today. That's www.omnirtls.com. If you enjoy these podcasts, the best way to support the Prisoner Officer Podcast is to share these episodes with your friends or family on social media. Let me invite you to visit www.theprisonofficer.com. If you haven't already, check out the Prison Officer Podcast on Facebook and click that little follow button. Or leave us a message, or better yet, leave us a review. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcast, Google, or Spotify, please click the subscribe button. Till next time, I'm Mike Cantrell. Watch your back, and please take care of each other out there behind those walls.